The empty hotel room. I never really planned on working in a hotel. The truth is, I needed the money, and the night shift at the little 4-story inn on the corner of Main and Pine paid better than my previous job. The hours were brutal, but the solitude and the steady paycheck made it tolerable. What I didn't realize was how much the stillness of the night could gnaw at you, or how easily it could break. From 11 p.m. until 7 a.m., the lobby was mine. A dimly lit reception desk, a flickering green neon sign outside that buzzed like an insect trapped behind the glass, and the faint smell of old carpet shampoo mixed with the sharp tang of disinfectant. Sometimes the silence was almost comforting, like being cocooned from the rest of the world. Other times it was oppressive, like the whole building was holding its breath, waiting. My routine rarely changed. After the last stragglers checked in, I'd brew a pot of cheap coffee, open the outdated property management software on the dusty desktop, and make my rounds in the hallways. The cameras covered most of the common areas, but management wanted a human presence to keep guests feeling safe. That meant one tired guy in a wrinkled uniform wandering dimly lit corridors every hour, with a jangling set of master keys clipped to his belt. Most nights blurred together. A late flight meant a bleary-eyed businessman stumbling in around midnight, or a long-haul trucker needing a hot shower and a bed. Nothing exciting, nothing dangerous. Until the night with room 204. The notification. It was a Tuesday, about 1:30 a.m. I was leaning back in the squeaky office chair, halfway through my second cup of coffee, when a notification popped up on the management system. It was a little red box flashing against the dull gray background. Room 204. Occupied. I frowned. The system was simple. When a room was checked in, it switched to occupied. When a guest checked out and housekeeping cleared it, it switched to vacant divided by ready. At the start of my shift, I had scrolled through out of habit 204 was listed as vacant. No one had checked in since. Thinking it was a glitch, I double-clicked the room. The log showed status change. Occupied. 1:27 a.m. No employee initials, no check-in record, no payment. Just a silent shift from empty to taken. The longer I stared, the colder I felt. Maybe housekeeping accidentally toggled it earlier in the day? Maybe the system was glitching. Still, procedure was procedure. I had to check the room. The walk to 204. I took the elevator up to the second floor. The ride was slow. The kind of mechanical grind that makes you wonder how long it's been since maintenance bothered to look at the cables. When the doors opened, the hallway stretched in front of me, dimly lit with wall sconces that gave off a yellowish glow. Everything was silent, except for the low hum of the vending machine at the far end. My footsteps sounded too loud against the old patterned carpet. Room 204 was halfway down on the left. The door looked perfectly normal. Brass number plate, safety peephole, a generic "Please do not disturb" sign dangling from the knob. The sign made me pause. Nobody had checked in there. Nobody should have placed that sign. I slid the master keycard into the slot. The light flicked from red to green. When I pushed the door open, the first thing that hit me was the air. Warm, humid, thick with the smell of stale smoke. The bathroom door was cracked open, and a faint haze of steam drifted out. Someone had been running hot water. Inside the room, I stepped in slowly, every nerve on edge. The lights were off, but the faint glow from the bathroom gave the place an eerie half-light. The bed was neatly made, untouched, but on the little table near the window sat an ashtray with the stub of a cigarette still smoldering, its tip glowing faintly red. My heart lurched. I was supposed to be alone on this floor. "Hello?" My voice sounded small. "This is staff, housekeeping, or security?" No answer. Just the drip of water from the bathroom sink. I reached for the wall switch and flipped it. The overhead light sputtered to life, buzzing faintly. The room was empty. The bed untouched. The closet door stood slightly ajar, but inside there was only a row of empty hangers swaying. "You said, the empty hotel room vid like hangings in hanging namchamtu." ChatGPT said, "Here's a fresh original retelling of The Empty Hotel Room in a Mr. Nightmare. Style first-person narration. Crafted to land in the 2,000-2,500 word range. It builds slowly, stacks verifiable details. Logs, cameras, smells, temperatures. Escalates tension, and ends with an unsettling open note. The empty hotel room. I didn't take the night job at the hotel because I liked people. I took it because it was quiet. Paid a little better than my last gig. and because quiet felt like something I could control. From 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., the lobby was mine. A long lacquered desk with water circles baked into the wood. A green neon sign outside that buzzed whenever the wind pressed against the glass, and an old desktop running management software that looked like it hadn't been updated since dial-up. The place was called the Maple Crest Inn, which made it sound like it should be tucked under red canopies and birdsong. In reality, it sat at the bottom of a cement incline beside a shuttered diner and a tire shop. The inn had 4 floors and an elevator that whined in a tired metallic falsetto. It had 2 ice machines, 3 cameras that worked, and another 2 that blinked the way a person blinks when they're pretending to be awake. My nights had a rhythm. Brew the cheap coffee that tastes like pennies. Check the night audit report, confirm room statuses, count the register. Between rounds, I'd watch the lobby's live feeds. A jittery grid showing the front door, the elevator, and the second floor west hallway. The rest of the cameras stored footage locally and uploaded on a timer whenever our anemic Wi-Fi allowed it. I learned the little delays, the sync issues, the gaps. I also learned the building sounds. The soda machine on 3 made a coughing noise every hour. The boiler coughed too, but lower, like a dog with a voice. The elevator groaned on start and eased on stop. Doors had their own identities. 406 clicked like a polite knock. 101 squealed like a violin bow slashing a high string. By week 3, I could tell when something was off simply by the way my ribs noticed the pressure of silence. That Tuesday night began like any other. A corporate guy in a wrinkled blue suit checked in at 11:38. Then a couple with a duffel bag that sagged as if it had a small anvil inside. By 12:30, the lobby had emptied. The neon hummed. Rain put freckles on the dark glass. At 1:27 a.m., the property management system chimed with a small, ugly sound. I glanced over at the monitor. A red rectangle had popped up, flashing, "Room 204, occupied." I frowned. At the start of shift, I'd flipped through the rooms out of habit. Room 204 had been vacant, divided by ready. Housekeeping had closed it at 3:14 p.m. after a midday checkout. No one had asked for a walk-in. No reservations had been assigned since midnight. And no one had used the guest entrance except the man in the blue suit and the couple with the duffel. The report log, a basic text list, said simply, 1 hour 27 minutes and 6 seconds. Status changed to OCCUPIED. By no initials, no staff code, no transaction. Just occupied. It was most likely a glitch. We'd had them before. Sometimes a room would flip to dirty or inspected when some internal flag misfired. Still, procedure said I had to walk up and confirm. If someone had actually entered, I needed to get a last-minute registration or call law enforcement. I took the elevator. It dragged me up with a soft, wet rope sound. The second floor opened onto a corridor washed in yellow light. The patterned carpet had a dark river down the center where thousands of feet had pressed the pile flat. The air was stale in a gentle way, like old bread left near a window. Room 204 sat halfway down the left side. The brass numbers looked freshly polished. A do not disturb sign drooped from the handle like a tired tongue. My skin prickled. Housekeeping hadn't left that there, and nobody had checked in. I tried the handle. It was locked. I slid in the master keycard. Green. The latch clicked, and the door eased inward a few inches, like it had been waiting to open. 3 things hit me in a quick braid. Warmth, humidity, and the smell of smoked tobacco. Not fresh, but recent, the end of a cigarette that dies reluctantly. The bathroom light was on, door cracked, pooling out a diffused glow that made the rest of the room a dim aquarium. "Hello?" I said, standing with 1 foot inside, 1 foot out. "Front desk." The only reply was the drip of a faucet. I stepped in and touched the switch just inside the door. The overhead light buzzed alive. A thin, electric insect. The bed was made tight corners, taut spread, the way housekeeping snapped it when they were in a good mood. There was an ashtray on the round table by the window. A cigarette butt rested in it, barely gray at the tip, a thread of smoke gone invisible, but its ghost still talking. A thin ring of ash circled the filter like a promise. On the desk lay a hotel pen and pad. The top sheet was blank. The next few sheets had the faint carvings of prior notes. Times, a name, a doodle that looked like a fish with a human eye. The trash can under the desk held nothing but a small soap wrapper and a plastic water bottle with a dent. "Security," I called, lying with confidence I didn't own. "If you're in here, please respond." Nothing responded except the faucet. I crossed the room and pushed the bathroom door. Steam moaned out and the mirror showed a white wound of fog. The sink faucet was on, warm water coiling in a thin thread, then breaking into taps. The tub was dry. The shower curtain, a milky white with cheap chrome rings, hung quiet. The toilet lid was down. The bath mat was folded like a patient towel. I leaned close to the mirror and touched it. It was hot. Someone had run steam long enough to bake the glass. When I turned off the faucet, the room felt more audible. I noticed the faintest squeak wood on wood, a chair leg shifting. It came from behind me, from the small square table. I pivoted. The chair by the window was a simple thing-padded seat, wooden legs. It wasn't moving. And yet, the sound felt like it had happened. A ghost in memory, or a memory in a ghost. I scanned the closet. The door was 3 inches open. I towed it wider with a slow push of my shoe. Inside, 4 hangers, a folded blanket, an ironing board leaning like a limp spine. The hangers swayed almost imperceptibly. It could have been the air I made when I opened the door. It could have been something else. My phone buzzed with a new notification. I glanced at the lock screen. 204. Motion. 2 a.m. I hadn't even known housekeeping had left the in-room motion sensor active. Some rooms had them cheap little white domes near the ceiling corners. An extra layer of security we mostly used for comps. We see you didn't leave the room. Here's a late checkout. The alert on my phone came from the back office app connected to the camera server. It shouldn't have pushed to me unless someone had left the sensor live. I opened the app. The dashboard listed motion events by room and time. 204 glowed red at the top with a spinning icon. And yet I was motion inside 204. I stepped back into the hall and pulled the door near closed, just enough to test the deadbolt. It latched. I stood there looking at the number plate and listened. The hallway had a heartbeat, the mammoth building kind. Subtle thumps in pipes, tiny clicks in thermostats, a distant elevator breath. Everything else was a drum made of silence. I slipped back inside, closed the door, and went to the desk. I sat down and opened the top drawer. There was a laminated tent card with emergency procedures, a Gideon Bible with a sticky spine, a small stack of envelopes with maple crest letterhead, and a little black composition notebook no thicker than my finger. We didn't keep notebooks in rooms. Stationary, yes. A pad, maybe, but not a student notebook. I turned it in my hands. The cover had a scuff like someone had dragged it across concrete. No name. I opened it to the first page. Ladder 317 was written in small block capitals, twice, then circled. Under it, he's taller in the glass. On the next page, a rough drawing of a door with a peephole. A stick figure stood inside. Outside, a taller stick figure stretched up, head elongated, arms long like ropes, fingertips almost at the peephole height. I skimmed forward. Most pages were blank. A few had timestamps, 1:27, 2, 3, 3:17 again. One page had a single sentence scratched deep enough to emboss the page behind. Don't open to the one who knows your name. I exhaled, the part of my brain that loved puzzles lighting up, the part that handled fear squeezing tighter. The room wasn't exactly terrifying. It felt inhabited by a story that didn't want to be gone. I left the notebook where I'd found it and moved to the door. I put my eye to the peephole. The hallway looked like a hallway yellow light, a seam in the carpet, the exit sign at the far bend glowing with a green that never matched the neon downstairs. Nothing moved. When I pulled back, I heard it. A small, cautious exhalation from the corridor. I froze with my palm on the door. Sometimes the mind misreads the blood in your ears for sound. Sometimes it doesn't. I lifted the latch quietly, turned the deadbolt, and edged the door open to the chain. The gap was 3 inches, just enough to see. I leaned in. Left. Nothing. Right. A shadow moved along the wall where the sconce made a narrow peninsula of light. Not the long glide of a person walking, more like the tilt of a head leaning into the edge of brightness, then withdrawing. A slow testing. I waited for footsteps. There were none. Can I help you? I called, pitched as professional and bored. It felt like tossing a rock into a deep well and waiting for the sound. The reply, when it came, arrived inside the room rather than from the hallway. The bathroom fan stuttered and began to spin, as if a finger had nudged it. Air tugged across my ankles. The chain on the door went cold under my hand. I shut it gently and relatched the locks. The fan droned for 10 seconds and died with a tired whir. I walked back to the desk and picked up the house phone. The line to the front desk rang once and clicked. My own console waited. I tapped 9 for an outside line, then 0 to ping the switchboard. The switchboard lit, and then before I pressed a number, the line crackled and a voice said my name. Not the full name. The shortened one people use when they know me well. The voice had a quality that made me think of a radio 3 rooms away. Not loud, not clear, but weighted with the shape of what it wanted. I didn't answer. I set the handset down without placing it in the cradle. It stayed live on the desk, whispering hum with a thin seam of breath. My phone buzzed again. Back office. Room 204. Key access recorded. 29. Master. Right. That was me. The system had finally caught up, stamping my use of the MasterCard. Next line. Room 204. Privacy tag applied. 212. I looked at the Do Not Disturb hanging inside the room. Now I'd flipped it without thinking when I came in. It swung a gentle inch. But the system only marked DND when a guest pressed the interior privacy button on the panel by the bed. Our rooms had both. A physical sign for housekeeping. A digital light for the desk. The panel by the bed glowed red. I walked over and pressed the button. It clicked off. The light went dark. From the bathroom, something tapped the mirror once, centered, like a knuckle. I told myself it could be the temperature shift, the last lick of heat contracting glass. But it sounded exactly like a nail. At 2:13, the lobby camera feed on my phone jumped. A figure had stepped just inside the front automatic doors and then stilled. The front desk camera would catch their face, but that cam was one of our unreliable ones. I swiped to the elevator view. The doors on the ground floor were open. No one was inside. I swiped to the second floor hallway. The view showed the far angle toward the ice machine. In the low frame rate, the machine's green LED blinked like a metronome. The corridor was empty. Between live feeds and what my eyes saw around me, something didn't add up. A person had triggered the doors. The elevator hadn't moved. The hallway held no person, unless they'd taken the stairs, or unless the doors had opened for no one. The handset on the house phone whispered again, "You're still in there." The hair on my forearms rose as a unit. "Who is this?" I asked, and immediately hated the question. It's the kind of question people ask in stories right before the answer is the last thing they hear. "Don't open for your name," the voice said, like it was reading to me. And then a small laugh, not cruel, just unsteady, as though the mouth it came from hadn't smiled in a while and didn't know how anymore. The laugh cut. The line went dead. The notebook on the desk felt heavier from across the room. I opened it to the page with the door drawing. The taller figure on the outside had small marks at its feet, lines like cross-hatching, as if it stood on something grated. A ladder rung? A doormat? The caption said, Ladder 317. The time was circled, underlined, circled again. I checked the clock on my phone. 2:19. I should have left. I should have locked the room, filed an incident report, and gone back to my desk. Called our on-call manager. Called non-emergency police. Called anyone whose job was to be bigger than the thing creeping through my night. But the system had flipped 204 to occupied. A privacy light had toggled from inside the room. Water had run for steam. A cigarette had burned to ash. And a phone had spoken my name without traveling through the front desk. I wanted, stupidly, to know the shape of it. Fear and curiosity aren't opposites. They're cousins that share a dark tooth. I turned off the bathroom light. In the sudden soft dark, the room's small red LEDs announced themselves. The smoke detector pinprick, the TV's standby eye, the thermostat's tiny heartbeat. I waited until my pupils opened enough to drink. The peephole glowed a little circle. I went to it and looked out again. The hallway kept its hush. Then, from very close to the peephole's outer side, there was a breath, a simple exhale, quick, followed by a small fog blooming over the lens, frosting my view. For a moment, the tiny world outside turned white. Then the fog thinned into my reflection. I stepped back a full pace before I knew I'd moved. Something tapped the door gently by my knee. Not a knock, a test. The way you'd touch a sleeping dog to see if it's real. "Front desk," I said, the way you'd invoke a saint. "Are you a registered guest?" No answer. The chain trembled. A soft vibration climbed through it into my hand. I decided to be done. Enough. I engaged the deadbolt, confirmed the latch, pocketed the notebook. Yes, I know that was wrong and prepared to leave. I hadn't yet opened the door when my phone vibrated hard enough to feel like a tiny animal fighting. Camera alert. Stairwell B. Motion 226. Stairwell B was 20 feet down the hall from 204. I switched to that feed. The camera sat on the landing, looking down the first flight toward the second floor door. In grayscale, the concrete steps looked like slices of cake. On the landing, something stood just beyond the edge of the lens, casting a shape without showing a body. A shadow that stretched long, not tall, as if the source were close to the ground but wide. An odd squat geometry, like a person crouched on their heels. The feed hiccuped. The shadow shortened. The door to the stairwell pushed open slowly, soundlessly, and then closed again without anything passing through it. I listened at the room door. A faint scrape came from the hall. The Do Not Disturb sign moved against the wood with a dry whisper. Enough. I opened the door to the chain and pitched my voice to the building itself. Maintenance check hallway is monitored. Announce yourself. From the space at the bottom of the door, a crescent of black, I saw a change in light, like a shoe blocking the cut of brightness. A smell came with it, wet fabric that had dried too often without heat. The shoe didn't move. I reached my fingers for the chain. The peephole went dark, as if an eye had pressed to it from the other side, so completely it swallowed light. I leaned back without meaning to. The chain screws squealed in the jam as something outside pushed once pressure, not force, and the door jumped in its frame. It didn't try again. The pressure went away. The shoe shadow slid back. The peephole brightened with a hazy hallway. I waited until the part of me that reacts had finished reacting. Then I opened the door fully into a clean, nothing hallway. On the floor just outside lay a hotel envelope. The Maple Crest logo, an anemic tree, sat in the corner. The flap was unsealed. It hadn't been there when I'd looked out a moment before. I knelt. The envelope carried a smell like old heater dust. Inside was a Polaroid, the square white border kind, with a narrow bottom. The photo showed the inside of room 204 from a low angle, pointed at the bed. The bed in the photo was made exactly as it was now, pillows marching in their same faked fluff. In the lower left corner of the image, the desk chair was turned slightly toward the lens. The composition notebook lay on the desk. The date scrawled along the bottom border said TUE. 1. 12 amperes in pen. I checked the tiny mechanical wall clock, 2:31 a.m. Someone had been inside earlier than me, taking a photo of the empty room, the notebook on display like bait. Or the photo wasn't from tonight at all, or the analog timestamp was a lie, or, in the corner of the Polaroid's glossy surface, near the chair leg, was a faint reflection of a shape. Not a face. Not a body. The curve of something that could have been a shoulder. It was out of focus and wrong in size, as if the camera had used a mirror that didn't agree with our geometry. I put the photo back in the envelope, slid both into my pocket with the notebook, and left the room. I locked it. The privacy light over the door glowed red again all by itself. Back at the desk, I pulled the night audit logs and printed the key usage for the second floor. The printer wheezed and spat 3 pages of dot matrix misery. The entries for room 204 showed housekeeping, 3:14 p.m. Then master, 2:09 a.m. mine. No guest access, no other master. Nothing. I opened the camera archive and cued the second floor hallway feed from 1 a.m. to 2:30 a.m. The player skipped like it was stepping across stones in a river. At 1:12 a.m., the frame froze for 2 seconds, the kind of freeze you get when the system drops a packet and then pastes the timeline together with an invisible glue. In those 2 seconds, the Do Not Disturb sign on 204's handle moved from inside to outside. On the frame before the freeze, it wasn't there. On the frame after, it was. No arm, no hand. Just there. I rewound. I leaned in until pixels turned to squares. The movement was seamless. The system's gap split the world, and something slipped through. At 2:26, the stairs feed showed what I'd seen. The door lunging open an inch and closing without a person. Audio recorded a faint metallic grit like a ladder foot dragged across concrete. I dialed the on-call manager. It rang forever and dumped me into a voicemail that was full. I dialed non-emergency police and hung up after the second ring, not sure how to tell them what I needed. Send someone to tell me my own building is behaving like a magician? I made a choice I can't justify but also can't regret. I took the composition notebook and the Polaroid and put them in the last drawer of the front desk under the box of spare toothbrushes and the folded "We value your feedback" cards. Then I wrote an incident entry. 204 status anomaly. In, room humidity. Unknown DND activation. Chain of custody items secured. I wrote it like a person who expected to be read by people, which is different than writing what actually happened. The night limped forward. I brewed fresh coffee just to feel like steam could still be explained. A rain squall hit the front glass with noisy relief. At 3:03, the elevator cycled to the second floor without a call tick on the log. Its doors opened. They waited. They closed. I didn't go look. At 3:17, my phone pinged 3 times fast. Stairwell B motion, second floor west motion. Room 204 motion. The hallway feed showed the ice machine LED blinking its animal heartbeat. The stairwell feed showed, halfway down the run, a square of darkness climbing one riser at a time, as if the camera were measuring the absence of light and calling it motion. The room feed, there was no room feed. We had no in-room cameras. The motion flag must have been the ceiling sensor spitting to the back end like a smoke alarm letting you know it dreamed you were cooking. I didn't move. I watched the feeds until the alert stopped. It did after 40 seconds. On the hallway video, the Do Not Disturb tag on 204 swung in a lazy arc and settled. At 4:11, a guest from 310 came down complaining his bathroom light had turned on by itself. At 4:29, a semi rolled by outside and hit its jake brake. And for a full 10 seconds, the world was just a vibrating chain of sound that erased the smaller fears. At 5:02, the neon sign gave a sputter and went quiet. A transformer somewhere offered up a tired cough and surrendered to the wetter air. At 6:15, I pulled a fresh stack of express checkouts and slid them under doors on the first floor. When I reached the second, I didn't linger by 204. I left its checkout out on the cart. I told myself it was because the Do Not Disturb sign asked me to. Day arrives in hotels like someone turning up a dimmer switch. Colors get braver. Smells of coffee and bleach collaborate. People emerge in hoodies with their phones and stand outside under the awning, squinting into a different kind of brightness. By 7:01, I'd handed the desk to Maya, the morning clerk, who wore a lip ring and moved like she didn't believe in ghosts because Rent believed in her. I told her about 204 the way a person tells another person where the floor is soft. She frowned at the log, tapped the keyboard, and said she'd pull housekeeping to do a second pass. She asked if I looked under the bed. I said yes. She said she'd look again anyway. I didn't sleep when I got home. I sat at my small kitchen table with the composition notebook and the Polaroid in front of me like potted plants. At 10:42, my phone buzzed with a text from Maya. HK found nothing in 204. Steam residue on mirror, towels dry, ashtray wiped. Privacy light keeps rearming. Also, for your information, someone left this in your drawer? She attached a photo. It showed my last drawer at the desk open, the toothbrush boxes, the feedback cards, the space where I'd put the notebook and photo. The space was empty. In its place sat a hotel pen set diagonally across a blank maple crest pad, and on the top sheet in block capitals, "Don't open to your name." I called her. "You moved the notebook?" "What notebook?" I told her about the Polaroid. She said, "You're messing with me because I laughed about 406 whistling last week." I wasn't messing with her. At 2:58 p.m., half asleep, I had the cheap, vivid kind of dream you get when exhaustion is a bad cook. In it, I was back at the 204 peephole, looking out. The hallway had become a vertical shaft. A stairwell turned on its side. My ear pressed to the door, but the wood felt like glass. I could hear something climbing, not stairs, but rungs metal hollow, a ladder making its way up the outside of the building. When the climber reached the second floor window, the glass bowed inward as if someone pressed a palm flat against it from outside and pushed reality in an inch. Then the peephole filled with an eye that wasn't an eye so much as an echo of one, the way a reflection in a spoon looks like an eye that learned to be wrong. It said my name without sound. I woke to my ringtone. Maya again. "We checked 204's closet," she said. "The inside back panel is loose. It opens to some kind of maintenance void. Housekeeping swears it was screwed shut last week, but now the screws look stripped. I told maintenance. I don't know. They're shrugging. 'Seal it,' I said. 'Tell them to seal it.' 'I did,' she said. 'Also, you have mail. A plain envelope with no stamp. Someone dropped it off asking for you. No name.' I was stupid enough to say, 'What's inside?' She sighed. 'I didn't open your mail, but the envelope is hard. Like there's a picture in it.' That night, when I went in for my shift, the envelope sat under the desk blotter. I slid a finger under the flap and pulled out a second Polaroid. This one showed the front desk taken from the lobby's threshold, my chair empty, the night audit printer's green LED on. The timestamp in pen at the bottom read 2/2/31 amperes. In the reflection on the front desk's glass top, a small circle glowed the peephole light from a door that shouldn't exist in the lobby at all. I reached for the phone, to call someone who could flatten this into paperwork, but the handset was already off the cradle. It lay on the desk, quiet at first, and then a breath arrived through it, soft and patient, and then a voice that wasn't unkind said, "Don't open for your name," and laughed like it had remembered how. And the lights in the lobby dimmed without dimming, and the green neon outside wavered as if the glass blinked. I put the handset back and sat very still. At 1:27 a.m., the PMS chimed and flipped room 204 to occupied. At 1:27 a.m., no one checked in. The man outside, the 24/7 store. I had been working the overnight shift at a 24-hour convenience store for about 8 months before the night everything changed. It wasn't glamorous work, mostly scanning cigarettes, brewing stale coffee, mopping spills, and trying to keep my eyelids from folding shut at 3 a.m. But it was steady pay, and for a college dropout with bills stacking higher than my confidence, it was what I had. Our store sat on the edge of town, where the main highway split into back roads. The parking lot was wide and mostly empty after midnight, lit by buzzing yellow lamps that left dark pools between their islands of light. One side of the lot backed onto a row of leafless trees and a broken chain-link fence. Beyond that was nothing but scrubland, stretching into blackness. Most nights were quiet. Truckers came through for gas and energy drinks. The occasional drunk stumbled in for a Gatorade. Once or twice a week, a patrol car idled out front, the officer coming in for coffee, talking with me just long enough to keep me human. The silence between those visits grew heavy sometimes, but it was manageable. Until the night the man appeared. The first sight. It was a Wednesday in February, cold enough that my breath fogged in the air every time the automatic doors opened. I remember it clearly. 2:08 a.m. I was behind the counter, flipping through my phone, when something tugged at the corner of my eye. Through the glass doors at the front of the store, I saw a figure standing in the parking lot. Not walking, not approaching, just standing about 15 feet from the entrance, in the middle of the glow of one of those buzzing lamps. At first, I thought it was a customer about to come in. I straightened, pocketed my phone, waited, but he didn't move. He was tall, maybe 6'2", in a dark hooded sweatshirt and jeans. His face was shadowed under the hood, though the light above should have caught it. His hands hung loose at his sides. He wasn't looking at the lot, or at the shelves through the window. He was looking directly at me. I lifted my hand, the way you do when someone might be deciding if they're welcome. He didn't react. No nod, no wave, no shift of weight. Just standing. I glanced at the clock again. 2:10. I figured maybe he was waiting for someone, or maybe high and zoned out. I tried to ignore him, but every few seconds I'd glance up and see the hood tilted at the exact same angle. Still staring. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The man hadn't moved an inch. When he finally entered. At 2:22, the automatic doors sighed open. The man stepped inside. The air carried his smell, a damp, musty odor like wet fabric left too long in a trunk. He didn't go to the coolers or the snacks. He didn't head to the counter. He walked slowly up and down the aisles, never picking anything up, never turning his head, but somehow always angled, so I felt he was aware of me. The store's cameras caught every aisle but one, the short back row where the storage closet jutted out, leaving a blind spot. He stopped there. I waited, expecting him to come back around. A minute passed. Then 2. I craned my neck to get a better angle. The back of the aisle looked empty. I stepped out from behind the counter, trying to look casual, and walked a few paces down the middle aisle. From there, I should have been able to see him. The aisle was empty. I hurried back to the counter and checked the monitors. He hadn't come out on the side cameras. He hadn't gone through the doors. He was just gone. My pulse hammered. Maybe he'd ducked into the bathroom, but I would have heard the door. I stood and stared at the entrance for a long time, half expecting him to appear again. He didn't. The note. By 3 a.m., I'd convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe he had slipped out without me noticing. Maybe I was tired. I went to lock the restroom doors just to be safe. On the way back, I noticed something sticking out from under the glass door of the entrance, pressed between the frame and the floor mat. It was a piece of paper, folded in half. I picked it up. In blocky handwriting, written with a black marker, it said, "You're not alone in here." My stomach sank. I glanced around the store. Empty aisles, humming coolers, the faint flick of fluorescent tubes. No one but me. I checked the bathroom again. Empty. I checked the storage closet. Empty. But the note trembled slightly in my hands because I couldn't shake the image of him standing out there, watching, waiting. The cameras. Around 3:15, I decided to check the recorded feeds. The DVR system was ancient, grainy, black and white footage, but it was all I had. I rewound to 2:08 when I first saw him. There he was, under the lamp. Tall, hooded, head tilted toward the store. Frame after frame, he didn't move. I fast-forwarded to 2:22, when the doors opened. He walked in, slow, deliberate. I jumped ahead to 2:25. That was when he should have still been in the blind aisle. The monitor showed the top-down shot of that row. For a split second, his hooded figure flickered at the far end. Then the feed stuttered, skipped 2 frames, and the aisle was empty. I scrubbed backward. The glitch happened every time. His figure shimmered for a fraction of a second, then the feed jumped and erased him. But in the very last frozen frame before the skip, his head was finally turned, looking directly up into the camera. The return. The rest of the night dragged by with no one else entering. Every time the automatic doors wheezed in the wind, I jumped. I wanted to call the police, but what would I tell them? That a customer had stared at me too long? That a note had appeared? They'd tell me to get some sleep. At 4:45, I went to restock the cups by the soda fountain. When I came back to the counter, something stopped me cold. Another folded piece of paper sat on the register. I hadn't heard anyone approach. I hadn't seen anyone on the monitors. This one read, "You looked away too long." I dropped it. My hands were shaking. My mind raced. Had someone slipped behind the counter when I was in the back? Was he still in here, hiding? I grabbed the heavy flashlight we kept under the counter and did a full sweep. Aisles. Bathrooms. Closet. Even behind the dumpsters outside. Nothing. When I came back in, the monitor showed the front doors sliding open at 4:49, then closing again. But in the footage, the space between the doors never showed a body. Just the empty parking lot beyond. The final hours. By 6 a.m., the sky outside was paling. I counted the drawer early just to keep my hands busy. My relief, a guy named Darren, arrived at 6:55. He strolled in with a yawn, sipping coffee from the shop down the road. "You look like hell," he said. "Rough night?" I didn't tell him everything, just that someone had been acting strange hanging around. He laughed it off and told me I was scaring myself. But when I gathered my things to leave, I noticed a third note stuck to the inside of the glass door, taped low where only someone kneeling would have placed it. This one was shorter. "See you tomorrow. Epilogue." I didn't sleep when I got home. I lay awake replaying the footage in my head, those missing frames, the way his hood had angled into the camera as if to prove he knew I was watching. The next night, when I drove past the store, I slowed. The lot was empty. Darren's car was out front. Everything looked normal. But under one of the buzzing lamps, in the farthest corner of the lot, I thought I saw a figure. Tall, hooded, standing perfectly still. I didn't stop to look closer, and I never worked another night shift again. The truck that kept coming back. I had been working security at a distribution warehouse on the outskirts of town for about a year when this happened. The site sat just off a 2-lane back road, surrounded by a wide gravel lot that doubled as parking during the day and as a drop-off zone for incoming freight trucks. At night, though, the place was empty, and it was my job to keep it safe. My shift started at 10 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m. The managers barely came by. The truck traffic stopped after 9:30. Once I did my initial walk of the perimeter, the night stretched into long hours of sitting in the booth, drinking coffee, and staring out at a mostly silent lot. Most nights were uneventful, just raccoons scurrying near the dumpsters, or the hum of a semi rolling past on the highway half a mile away. That night, though, the silence broke around 12:15 a.m. when headlights swept across the gate. First arrival. A dark pickup truck pulled into the lot, moving slow. It was an older model, looked like a Chevy Silverado, maybe from the early 2000s, with dull paint and one headlight dimmer than the other. It idled near the far corner of the lot, well outside the glow of the pole lamps, and sat there. I waited for the driver to come toward the booth. Nobody did. After a few minutes, I stepped out with my flashlight. The air was sharp and cold. Gravel crunched under my boots. The pickup's engine shut off just as I raised the beam. The cab looked empty, windows tinted, interior dark. I waved, called out, "This is private property. Can I help you?" No reply. Just silence. I radioed it into the log. Standard procedure. Unidentified pickup. East corner. Midnight 15. By the time I looked back up, the truck was gone. No engine sound. No headlights. Just empty gravel and my breath puffing white. Second arrival. At 1:04 a.m., the headlights returned. Same truck, same corner. This time it rolled a little closer, stopping near the chain link fence that separated the lot from the tree line. It idled for a while, exhaust smoke puffing in the cold, then backed up slowly, turned, and disappeared down the road. I wrote it in the log again, irritation mixing with unease. Maybe a lost driver. Maybe kids screwing around. Still, something about the deliberate way it parked always in the shadows made my scalp prickle. Third arrival. By 1:38 a.m. it came back. I caught it on the security feed first, the grainy black and white camera aimed at the east side of the lot. A set of headlights glowed at the edge, then froze as if waiting for me to notice. I zoomed in on the monitor. The truck was angled differently now, pointed straight at my booth from 100 yards out. Its lights stayed on this time, bathing the gravel in twin cones. I stepped outside again, flashlight in hand. I felt stupid yelling across the lot, but I did anyway. "This is private property. If you don't leave, I'm calling the cops." The engine revved once loud, guttural, and then cut off. The lights died. When my eyes adjusted, the corner was empty again. I knew I hadn't imagined it. The camera had caught it too. The markers. At 2:10, I left the booth to do a walkthrough. The lot was silent, but near the far corner where the truck had first parked, I found something I knew hadn't been there earlier. A stack of small rocks, 3 of them, arranged like an arrow pointing toward the warehouse doors. At first I thought it was nothing kids again, or maybe just coincidence. But as I circled the lot, I found another. A red zip tie looped around the fence, pulled tight right at eye level. Then, closer to the dock entrance, a piece of duct tape stuck to the gravel with some kind of chalk mark drawn on it, like a crude X. Someone was marking spots. Deliberately. I snapped photos with my phone, wrote it in the log, and walked faster than usual back to the booth. Fourth arrival. At 2:43 a.m., the truck rolled in again. This time I didn't leave the booth. I watched the monitors as it parked in the exact same place as the rock marker. Its engine cut, but the brake lights stayed on longer than natural, like the driver wanted me to know. They were sitting there, foot pressed down, watching. The lights finally blinked out. For several minutes, the grainy feed showed only the outline of the truck in faint moonlight. Then the screen stuttered, and when the frames caught up, the space was empty. I leaned back, heart hammering. The camera had skipped before, sure, but never just in that spot, never at the exact second I needed proof. Closer. By 3:10, I heard it before I saw it. The slow crunch of tires on gravel. Closer this time, near the middle of the lot. I gripped the flashlight and peeked out the booth window. The truck was only 30 yards away now, angled toward the booth. Its engine idled steady, louder than before. I could just make out the shape of a driver behind the wheel, but the glare of the windshield hid any features. I grabbed the phone and dialed non-emergency police. It rang once, then cut dead. Static hissed in the line. When I looked back up, the truck was gone again. I stepped out, scanning the lot with my beam. My own shadow wavered across the gravel. Nothing. No taillights fading down the road. No exhaust haze. But when I turned to go back inside, something caught my foot. On the ground, right at the booth's door, was a fresh mark. A small plastic triangle reflector, the kind you'd see on a roadside kit, propped upright and pointing directly at the booth. The knock. By 3:40, I was shaking. Coffee wasn't helping. I locked the booth door and pulled the blinds halfway down. That's when the knock came. Not on the booth door. On the side window. 3 slow taps. Knuckle on glass. I froze. Turned. The window was dark. Nothing but my reflection staring back. I raised the flashlight and clicked it on. The beam hit the glass, bounced back, lit up nothing but my pale face. The knocking stopped. When I lowered the flashlight, I noticed it. A handprint smeared faintly across the outside of the glass. Large. Too large. The fingers spread unnaturally wide, stretching almost the full width of the pane. I stumbled back, heart slamming. Fifth arrival. At 4:05, the truck returned, one last time. This time it didn't stay at the edges. It pulled right up to the booth, close enough that the headlights flooded the inside with white light. I couldn't see a face, just the outline of a hooded figure in the driver's seat. They didn't move, didn't roll down the window, just sat there, engine rumbling, lights blinding. I picked up the phone again, praying the line would work. Dead. I grabbed the radio instead, keyed it, tried to call dispatch. Only static. When I looked up, the passenger side window of the truck was open. Something long and pale stuck out an arm maybe, but it bent at an angle that didn't look human. Elbow wrong, fingers too many joints. It tapped the truck's metal door 3 times. The same rhythm as the knock on my window earlier. Then the lights cut. The engine died. And when my eyes adjusted, the truck was gone. Just empty gravel in front of me. Aftermath. By 6 a.m., I was pale and exhausted. My relief guard, an older guy named Frank, showed up yawning and sipping coffee. "You look like you saw a ghost," he said. I told him about the truck, the markers, the knocking. He laughed, clapped me on the shoulder, and said I'd been drinking too much caffeine. But when he stepped into the booth, he stopped, stared. On the inside of the glass, the inside was a smear, a handprint. Long, wide, too many joints. Exactly like the one I'd seen outside earlier. Frank didn't laugh after that. Epilogue. I quit 2 weeks later. They said the lot was safe, no sign of trespassers, cameras clean. But sometimes, driving home late at night, I catch a glimpse in my rear view. Headlights behind me, one dimmer than the other, following a little too long before peeling off into the dark. And every time, I hear that slow, deliberate knock. 3 taps. Patient. Promising. The 317 call. I came on shift at 11 p.m. The emergency department had already slowed down from its evening chaos, leaving the corridors hollow with only the buzz of fluorescent lights. The hospital was old paint flaking on walls, pale green tile floors, the smell of disinfectant and cheap mint that never seemed to fade. I worked night security in Block A, assigned to the long corridor that connected to the surgical wing. At night, that wing was mine. A desk with an ancient landline, a few scattered cameras, a battered 2-way radio that wheezed like an asthmatic when you keyed it. My routine was clockwork. Patrol at 12:30, back at the desk, log notes, pour coffee, watch the cameras. By 2 a.m., the building always fell into a strange hush. The beeping monitors slowed to a steady metronome. Nurses' shoes clicked softly, and the automatic doors barely whispered. Operating Room 5 had been sealed for a month. The door was taped with a red tamper band signed by facilities. Every time I walked past, the sight of that limp red strip felt like a warning tongue. Above the door, the small security light blinked every 30 seconds, steady as a heart monitor. At 2:48, I poured my second cup of coffee. The hall cameras showed nothing but empty linoleum. I wrote in the log, 250. Hallway A 2 clear. Or 5 seal intact. Vent noise steady. My pen dug too hard into the page on that last word. I'm not superstitious, but every guard knows the weight of the 3 a.m. hour. They call it the dead hour for a reason. When the ceiling feels lower, the air colder, and the silence heavier on your chest. At 3:12, the radio sputtered with static. I raised it. A 2 copy. Nothing. Just hiss. I set it down, felt my pulse a little louder than normal. Then the landline at my desk lit up with a dull amber glow. The display read, SRC, or 5. I stared at it. Or 5 was sealed. The camera outside showed the door, still shut with the red tape intact. No one standing there. No light from inside. But the system insisted. The call was coming from that room. I picked up the receiver. Security A2. At first, only breathing. Not panicked. Slow. Steady. Like someone leaning close to the handset. Then a voice rasped my name. Not my full name, my nickname. The one only friends and longtime coworkers used. Every hair on my arms lifted. Identify yourself, I demanded. That room is sealed. If you need help, state your name. The breathing stopped. There was a faint metallic tick, like something tapping a hollow pipe. Then the line went dead. I stared at the receiver, then at the monitor. Camera 02 still showed nothing but the sealed door. I checked the phone log. It recorded. 3 hours, 12 minutes, and 58 seconds. Inbound call or 5. Duration 09. I snapped a picture with my phone. Proof. Documentation. I was still looking at the log when the light blinked again. This time, no ring, just a flicker. At 3 hours, 16 minutes, and 40 seconds. Again at 3 hours, 16 minutes, and 58 seconds. Then at 3:17 exactly, the phone rang loud and full. Display, SRC, or 5. And below that, in tiny text I'd never seen before. Privacy, active. That meant the internal privacy button had been pressed inside the room to block calls. But no one had access. No one should have been able to touch it. I lifted the receiver with a hand that didn't feel steady. What I heard was a whisper, thin as thread but deliberate. Don't open when you hear your name. The words broke 3 times, cut by shallow gasps. Then came another metallic clink, like something laid gently on stainless steel. I forced myself to respond. If you're inside, knock twice, so I know. For a long moment, nothing. Then, clink, clink, 2 sharp taps. I lowered the receiver slowly, hit record on the desk phone's outdated system. My logbook was open in front of me, my handwriting suddenly cramped and uneven. I radioed. A 2 to maintenance. Getting phantom calls from OR 5. Might be line fault. Request inspection. No answer. Only static. On the monitor, camera 02 blinked to black for half a second. When the feed returned, the red seal tape across OR 5's handle was quivering. Just slightly, like something brushing from the inside. I stood, grabbed my flashlight, clipped the body cam on, and hit record. At 3:20, I walked the corridor toward the surgical wing. The air grew cooler, the kind of cool that crawls up your ankles. The sensor lights overhead shifted from yellow to white as if someone else was moving. But on the camera feed, I was alone. I stopped in front of OR 5. The red tape was unbroken. Up close, though, I saw tiny scratches across the seal, as if fingernails had dragged over it. I pressed my ear to the door. Inside was the faint hum of ventilation, and a soft tack-like paper catching in rollers. The fax machine. I remembered the ancient fax unit left on a side table in that room. It was supposed to be disconnected. Anyone in there? My voice echoed too loudly. I knocked 3 times. Thud, thud, thud. The sound throbbed back against my knuckles. No reply. I aimed the body cam up at the hallway camera, capturing its status light blue, active. Then I crouched to peer at the bottom of the door. The gap was too thin for airflow, which meant no pressure difference, which meant no one should be running equipment inside. I stepped back, decided not to break the seal. That was above my pay grade. I returned to my desk at 3:23. I replayed the recording. 7 seconds of audio, shallow breathing, fabric brushing a microphone. Then that same phrase, don't open when you hear your name. The word name dragged like teeth clenched on every letter. The phone lit again. No ring, just the glow. I picked up. A long inhale. Then silence. I held my breath. The background shifted, like a room's acoustics changing. Then the voice spoke again, flat, almost reciting, 3:17, don't open. This time it used my surname, not the nickname. Then it said my exact location. A 2 or 5. I jerked upright. It was describing where I stood as if tracing me on a map. I pressed record. Identify yourself. The line paused. Then came a jagged, scratchy laugh. Not joyful like air rasping through a torn throat. After that, a sound of something sliding across metal, a wet scrape. Then the call ended. At 3:26, the hallway sensor outside OR 5 lit on camera. The monitor showed a low shadow crossing from left to right, bent over like someone pushing a cart. It paused at OR 5's door. Then the feed skipped a frame, and the hall was empty. I called one of the nurses on duty. He picked up, rushed, said he was busy with a seizure patient and would come later. I tried to insist. He said, give me 10 minutes. I turned back to the monitors. The amber phone light blinked one last time, as if mocking me. I never picked it up again. Aftermath. When the morning staff arrived at 7, I handed over the log and the audio recording. The day supervisor frowned, said it must be crosstalk interference. But she couldn't explain why the log showed inbound calls from a sealed room, or why the privacy setting had toggled. Maintenance checked R5 later. The fax machine was plugged in and humming, though it had no line. A single blank sheet had been half fed through. black streaks running across it as though something had pressed on the glass. The red seal tape was intact, but scuffed, just as I'd seen. They retaped it anyway. When I replayed the recording for them, the supervisor paled but forced a laugh. Probably someone spoofing the line. Forget it. But that laugh stayed in my ears. Short, broken, jagged, nothing human about it. Epilogue. I lasted 2 more weeks on night shift before requesting reassignment. But sometimes, awake at 3:17 a.m., I hear it again in memory. The quiet breathing, the patient whisper. Don't open. When you hear your name. And then the scrape of something heavy on stainless steel, waiting for me to answer.